Hi guys, my name is Blake. Welcome. I have a lot of books to talk about, so I'm just going to jump right in. So in May, I managed to read 9 books, one of which was a children middle grade fantasy, one was a YA fantasy, and then the other 7 were adult fantasy. And I had 1 2-star, 1 2.5 star, 1 3-star, 3 4 stars, and 2 4.5 stars. So lots of ratings. I'm just going to go from the one that I liked the least to the one that I liked the most. The first book I have is The Beast is an Animal. This is a YA fantasy where we are following our main character Elise, and she was raised in this town that is very fearful of the soul eaters. And the soul eaters come into this town and they consume the souls of all the adults. And they leave all of the children in a cursed sleep, all of them except for Alice. And all these children are forced to go to a new village. And this new village is very fearful of the soul eaters, and especially these children who were in contact with the soul eaters. There were a lot of atmospheric vibes. The town people were very much afraid of the witches. It has this very strong religious component to these villagers, and they are afraid of the soul eaters, and they think that they come from the woods, which is evil, and they come from the beast. And it's got a lot of those witchy tones in it, I guess. I like that atmosphere and that story setup. But the second half of the story felt very different from the first half. And it does have magical realism elements, which I did not really enjoy. It felt very anticlimactic at the end. The next book I have is Odd Magic by Patricia A. McKillip. So I was at the used bookstore and I saw all of this author's books there in a collection, and they were all like 50 cents to $1. So I just bought all of them because I have heard really great things about this author and their writing style. I know that they are known for very fairy tale-esque stories, and this one also felt fairy tale-esque, and I have seen people recommend this one as like where you should start with her works, but they are older books, so I don't really see them talked about very often, and I was really curious to see if I would like them, and sadly this one didn't land for me. So we are following our main character Brendan, who is this man who has this unique plant magic. He can like speak to the plants, and he just magically knows things about them. And because of his abilities, he is kind of shunned by the village. He's kind of an outsider. But then one day, this woman appears to him and offers him a job as a gardener at this magic school. And he goes there hoping to find some sense of belonging. And this kingdom is very much in control of the magic in it. The king doesn't like it when anyone has strong magic or any type of magic that can't be controlled. And he immediately notices Brendan's power, and that's kind of where the story takes off. And I really wish that this story would have just followed Brendan as a gardener in a magic school, because I liked his chapters and I liked that storyline. Those aspects did feel cozy, and it was very well written, and I did like following Brendan's chapters, but we were quickly introduced to a ton of POV characters, and this book is only like 200 pages, so I felt like we had too many characters, and because we had so many characters, we couldn't really get to know anybody. Up next, I have The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. And this book was like so unhinged. It was wild. So we are following the Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels, as you can probably guess from the title. And we're following Cecilia, who wants to become a member, like her aunt. And this society of women basically run around and they fly their magic houses, and they are pirates, and they steal from each other, and they try to assassinate one another, and they do their best to be proper ladies in society. It started out like incredibly funny. It was a lot of fun. It was witty. It was well written. But quickly I got kind of bored of it. Hi, Bodhi. And there were a lot of things about this book. It was incredibly packed with stuff. I almost have a hard time talking about it because so much happened. And if you read the summary on the back of the book, like, those things don't really start happening until the halfway point. So maybe don't read the summary. But like, it is so packed with so many different storylines and so many different characters. It feels like it's too much. There was too much going on in the plot. And we just had these characters popping in and out of the story on the regular. And I really did not like the romance at all. And I've seen a lot of people on Goodreads talking about how they liked the romance. I didn't at all. I really liked the idea of these Victorian ladies in their flying houses, not pirate ships, but flying houses. And it was incredibly cheeky and witty, and it was just a good time. I think I saw somebody on Goodreads who, sadly I can't remember their name, but they described it as being like the writers of Shrek writing The Princess Bride and Monty Python, and I completely agree. I think that's an amazing comparison. One of my biggest complaints was actually I didn't like the main character, and I didn't like the romance that ensued between her and our love interest. She spends the entire book, in her entire monologue, she's like, do I trust him? Do I not trust him? Maybe I should just kill him. And there's a ton of banter between them, which I normally love. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but like, there is such a thing as too much banter. Like, that is all they did throughout the entire book. And I feel like they had no development beyond that. And it felt like just a broken record. Like, I was just tired of Cecilia not trusting him and saying that she was going to kill him. And I normally love when characters are threatening to kill each other, but I feel like I have seen other forms of media that have done this trope, or I guess it's not really a trope, but I feel like I have seen this done better in other films and in other books. And I feel like the story just went on and on and on. I actually thought we had reached the end of the story. And then I discovered that I had several more chapters to go in the audiobook. And then I thought that we had reached another point where we were wrapping things up. And then it was like, psych, there's more. So I feel like the story just kept going. Next I have The Paper Magician by Charlie and Holmberg. And in this book we're following our main character Sione, who has just graduated from magic school. And she is at the headmaster's office, and she is going to pick her element that she is supposed to master in. And she has always wanted to be a metal magician, but then the school is like, sorry, we don't have enough paper magicians, so you have to be in paper. And she's extremely disappointed about this because paper is like the lowest of the lows. Like, they're kind of underappreciated. There aren't very many of them. It's seen as kind of a weak magic. But she is forced to go and train under an expert paper magician. I actually really enjoyed this book. It has a lot of low ratings on Goodreads, but I was really just in love with the magic in this world. It is in a Victorian setting, and we have like so many different types of magic. So there's paper and rubber and metal and glass. And then we also have these dark magics, which are forbidden. And the magic was so cool. I love everything about the paper magic. So you can see the future in paper. And paper also has the ability to create living things. And our paper magician, the master that's teaching her, he has a housekeeper that is a skeleton, but like they're made out of paper. And he also makes Sienny a paper dog. And it's just so cute. Like, everything about the paper magic was amazing. And they can also bring stories to life. So I would 10 out of 10 be a paper magician. This book is only 200 pages long. So because it is so short, I feel like we really don't get to see as much as I would want. Like, with the world building and the magic system and the plot of this story, I felt like it easily could have been a 400-page book, but that's not what it was. We had 200 pages, and so I feel like because of that, a lot of things are rushed. Like, the characters, we don't really get to know. We don't really get to know much about the world building or the magic system, and everything just flies by. And I feel like the characters don't really get to develop a natural relationship because the story progresses so quickly, done through a series of flashbacks. And these are like flashbacks on top of flashbacks. And I know that there are readers out there who really hate flashbacks. I personally don't mind them, and given the situation of the story, it made sense. So I wasn't too hard on them, but I feel like that would be a lot for some readers, or a lot of readers might think that maybe that's a cop-out, because that's the majority of his character development is through flashbacks. But I do feel like their relationship was insta-lovey because of how short the book is and how quickly it went. The Golden Compass by Phillip Pullman. This is a reread for me. I read the first time when I was in the 3rd grade, I think. I decided to reread it because I recently saw a discussion online about the author and what his intentions were with this book and some of the themes within it. And the only thing that I really strongly remembered about this book from reading it in the 3rd grade was that I enjoyed the book. And I loved the concept of the demons. Like, I thought they were animal companions. I don't think that my 3rd grade self realized that they were supposed to be your soul. And I remember especially being really upset about the little boy Tony who had lost his ratter. And that was like the only the standout memory I had of it. And I remember I DNF'd the second one because I didn't like it. So I decided to go back and revisit this and see for myself what the author was trying to convey and what the themes of the story were. And I'm surprised that this is like a children's book. Because I don't think that my child self understood what I was reading. Like, I think I read them, and I think a lot of things just went over my head. And I feel like I got so much more out of it and enjoyed it more as an adult. And I think, regardless of what you think about the themes of this book, I think that it's worth a read for the world building alone. I was really sucked into this book, and I loved the world. And we had some really wonderful villains in this world that were even more terrifying to me as an adult than as a kid. Because, like I said, I don't think I understood what they were actually doing in this book. And I also like that the story is being told from the perspective of Lyra, who is a little girl. And then the way she views things and the way that she understands things is very different from the adults in the stories. Up next I have Fourth Wing. And this book has been all over the place. It has taken the internet by storm. And it has an average of 5 stars on Goodreads, which is wild to me. The marketing team did their job for this book. And it's a physically stunning book as well. So there is that. But I don't necessarily get the hype around this book. I enjoyed it. But it wasn't anything new or unique or original. I've seen a lot of people say that it feels like older YA. I've seen a lot of people compare it to Divergent, and I completely agree with all of those things. It feels like a 2010s YA novel, and I do get the Divergent comparisons. And wait, I don't think I told you what this book was about. So we're following Violet, who is trained all of her life to be a scholar, but then her mom tells her that she has to become a dragon rider, and she is forced into the dragon riding academy, which is a very cutthroat environment. I will say, I think my biggest hang-up about this book was the writing style. I think it just needed more editing, because I had marked in my book several places where the writing felt very repetitive, or like almost the exact same phrasing was taken from other places in the book. And the way that she describes the love interest sometimes pulled me out of the story, because the things that she compares them to, it was a lot. And every time she sees the love interest, her head tingles. I cannot tell you how many times she said that her scalp or her head tingles or whatever. And it got to the point where I was like, her head hasn't tingled yet. It's going to happen soon. And it did. And I would laugh every time it came up. It feels very crammed. Like, we cover a lot of ground in this first book that I wasn't expecting to cover. And I really wish that we would have slowed down a little bit. Because I feel like we just jumped from big scene to big scene, and then all of the stuff in between we didn't really cover. So it felt like we were missing parts of the story. And I will say that the first part felt very different from the second part. So I saw this being pitched a lot as like an academic setting. It really wasn't. We were in a war college, but we didn't do any we did very minimal academic stuff. So I didn't get the academia comparisons, but that's what the first half was. It was like a lot of setup, I think. And then in the second half, we get actually to the dragons. And I loved the dragons in this world. I love that the dragons have their own sort of political system. And I love that the world itself is pretty much controlled by the dragons. I like that people think they're controlling it, but it's basically the dragons. And this kingdom is at war with this other kingdom who has griffins. So we're basically in a setting where it's dragons versus griffins. And I thought that was very cool. But in the second half, we're really getting to the meat of the story. And then we're kind of getting to the main conflict. And it felt like part one was just rushing through so we could get to this part two thing. And I did think that part two was a lot better than the first part, especially in terms of the writing and then the storytelling, because I felt like that was where I was like, this is where things are starting to make sense. Because in the first part, I was like, why are we rushing through this? And what are we rushing to? Like, what is the point of this story? And then we found it. I feel like from all the things I've said about it, it might make it seem like I didn't like this book, but I did enjoy it. I read it in one sitting, so I must have been feeling some kind of way about it. Up next, I have an Alchemy of Masques and Mirrors. And I read this mostly in April. I finished like the last chapter or so on the first day of May, excuse me. And I read it for Alan's readathon from the Library of Alexandria. I never would have picked this book up originally, but it was so good, guys. I'm still thinking about it. I'm getting ahead of myself. But in this world, we are following our main character, Isabelle, and her musketeer, Jean-Claude. And Isabelle has received a marriage proposal from this other kingdom, but her father is horrible. And she's like, well, getting married to this other guy has to be better than living with my father. So she goes to marry this prince in this other kingdom, becomes the target of assassination attempts, and she and Jean-Claude are working together to kind of unravel what's going on. That is probably a very weak explanation for all of the things that are going on in this plot line, but the world building is what I want to talk about the most because it was great. So we are in like this steampunk setting. We have airships and we have floating kingdoms, and the kingdoms that we're following are supposed to be France and Spain. And we also have a great magic system where we have like mirror magic where people can like travel through mirrors, and then we have shadow magic, which was horrifying. And we have like mentions of other kingdoms and other magics, and the way that the world building and the magic system go together is done so well. I feel like the author really spent a lot of time on that, and it really shows. And Isabel is really into the academics of this world, but women aren't allowed to study academics. She loves to listen to the lectures from the university, and she's a very smart person. I feel like all of the characters in this world are very intelligent. So Isabel's chapters do lean more like political intrigue, and Jean-Claude's chapters are more action-packed, and he is kind of on the hunt he's like going around gathering information for Isabel, and his chapters are more action-packed. I definitely preferred his chapters. I also like that he is a middle-aged man, like he is older, and he doesn't want to do all the fighting anymore. He physically can't do all the fighting anymore. And I really loved their relationship with one another. Next, I have my 4.5 reads, and the first one I want to talk about is Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Fairies. So we are following our main character, Emily, who is compiling an Encyclopaedia of Fairies, and she is in this remote northern town, and she is struggling to gain the trust of the townspeople. She struggles socially, and she's having a really hard time completing her research. And then her academic rival, Wendell, shows up and saves the day because he is a charmer and he wins the people over, and he and Emily work together to finish her encyclopedia. I did the air quotes around academic rivals because that's what the story pitches them as in the summary, but they're not really rivals. There is, from the very beginning, we know that there is kind of this air of friendship to their relationship. I really loved Emily's character. I really struggle socially as well, and so she felt very believable. Like some of the things that she said and did was extremely relatable. And then we have Wendell, who is very outgoing and very much the opposite of Emily, and he provided like a really great foil to Emily's character. I loved watching them kind of butt heads and listen and reading about their banter. It was really wonderful. And I love the Fae in this world. Like, it's very much, there are all sorts of Fae in this world. There's like the evil trickster kind of Fae, and then there's like the little tiny flower garden type Fae, and there is a lot. It is very much like a light academia feeling story, and I love that the story is also told through Emily's journal entries. I loved the cold setting. It was very atmospheric and very cozy. It was just all the things that I wanted. And my only complaint is that there was this scene towards the end of the book, and because this is told through Emily's journal perspective, we are limited to just what she's telling us. Like, there's a lot of things that we miss out on, and the action scenes don't really seem as intense through journal entries, because Emily is just reflecting back on them, particularly in the main conflict of the story and the climax towards the end. There is kind of a lot going on, and Emily is in like a dreamlike, trance-like state, and she's having a hard time remembering the events. So the journal entries feel very detached, and we really don't learn a whole lot about that time period towards the end there. I know this is very vague, and I'm trying not to spoil things, but that was my thing that I wanted to see more of, and we didn't get to see more of it, which it does make sense because they are journal entries, and Emily doesn't remember, but I would have liked to have seen more. And lastly, I have Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. I feel like this book was exactly what I wanted at the time that I read it. So we're following our main character, Dora, and it is another Victorian fantasy. I swear, I have never read so many Victorian books in my life at one time. But we're following Dora. Half of her soul was taken by a fae, and because of this, she doesn't feel any feelings or emotions as normal people do. And she knows that she is not going to get married, but she wants to go and be supportive of her cousin and help her find a match. But then when they get to London, there is a mysterious sleeping sickness that is sweeping around town, and Dora kind of gets involved. I loved Dora's character. Like with Emily Wilde, Dora really struggles socially, and I felt so much secondhand embarrassment for her so many times. And she was just an incredibly relatable character. I really liked hearing her inner dialogue, and just her sense of self was really wonderful as well. But I do feel like the world could have been explored a little more. Like, I'm really sad that I won't get to see more of it, or that I'm like at surface level, I feel like. And I know that there are 2 other books in the trilogy, but they are standalones. So I feel like I won't get more of that. Those were all of the books that I read in the month of May. Let me know if you have read any of these or what you read in May, because I would love to know. And I'll see you again with another video soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.